Hey, I'm Tyler Cole. I'm the Director of Climate Solutions at Tree Energy Solutions, TESS.
And Tyler, you've just got off stage here at our North American CO2 Summit. Just give us a quick flavour of what you discussed up there.
Yeah, I was happy to join the panel today discussing e-fuels and its impact on the CO2 market. We're a producer of synthetic methane we call ENG, or electric natural gas. We produce it using recycled and captured CO2. So it was important to get in front of this audience and start talking about the dynamics of future new demand for the existing market and understand its impact. So it was a pleasure to introduce ENG to the team.
Great, and we're delighted to have you on stage there. Looking at the demand that you've just spoken about, how is this demand looking and what's driving this demand?
The demand's primarily being driven by decarbonization, either policy or corporate action, not only here but abroad as well. CO2 is a primary product that we could use to produce fuels to replace fossil fuels, and so we're seeing projects on the horizon to take investment decisions that would start needing new CO2 supply in the later half of this decade in 2030 that could really compete with what the current market is doing. So we want to be cognizant of how this new demand impacts critical CO2 needs and make sure that we develop the industry alongside each other. But it really is about how we do what we're currently doing greener.
Sure, and presumably with decarbonisation being the main driver here, it's going to continue to grow and it's a growing opportunity as well.
Exactly, yeah, and that was my takeaway for the audience, was to lean into this opportunity. If you're involved in the CO2 supply chain, you've not seen consistent growth over the last 10 years because supply and demand have been roughly balanced. As people put more value on the molecule for different needs, specifically with decarbonization, for anybody who's active in the industry today, it should be a growth opportunity to figure out how you can meet new demand needs with new sources of supply and connect those 2 points.
So what's the key to unlocking the growth here, and is there anything holding it back that's going to hinder this growth?
Absolutely, there are challenges ahead. Cost, certainty of policy, those are primary questions that need to be answered soon in order to unlock investment decisions being made in the next, call it 18 to 36 months that are really, really crucial to scale both supply and demand. And that's going to involve a lot of collaboration. So we heard from Rob and the CO2 Association today, those sort of educational stakeholder engagements, specifically for policymakers, but also for the industry to understand what those roadblocks are key to be having those conversations. But until you get certainty on how real the demand is and what they're willing to pay, supply's going to consistently lag. So those are the key unlocks.
And policy has been a key theme here at this event. So what would you like to see from decision makers and policy makers?
I think the one thing that struck me this morning was the interconnectedness of this existing industry with new sources of supply and demand, and making sure that there are no unintended consequences, right? That as we're not robbing Peter to pay Paul, as you might say, we want to take care of our CO2 in a responsible and safe way, and we want to incent new sources of demand and supply, but we don't want to do that at the expense of critical industry. And so having more people at the table, as Rob said this morning, is critical. I forget how he phrased it, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. So this industry really needs to step up and start advocating more with policymakers.
And a final question from me on e-fuels. How quickly do you envisage this ramp going forward over the short-term future?
Short term, in the next 2 years, I think you'll see projects shake out. You'll see the projects that are real take investment decisions and start putting steel in the ground. Projects coming online at scale later part of this decade, call it 28, 29, 30. We're targeting a handful of smaller scale projects sooner, but if you're talking about true CO2 demand impact for e-fuels, I would call it 2030 before you start seeing actual molecules being delivered at scale.
Sure, and I'll leave the final words with you. If you had a message to those watching who might not have been in the room today, what would be your message to them?
Mine's going to be selfish because I'm a native Nashvilleian, so I'm always going to advocate for GasWorld to come back and host the event here in my hometown. So if you missed it and you weren't available to join, ask GasWorld to come back to Nashville. If you can't join us there, go to Denver next year. It's been a great event. I've learned a ton.
Fantastic. Tyler, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thanks, Tom.